When it comes to the pathway that has brought us to this reform, I'm really aware that I'm an inheritor of the most significant piece of legislation in the 20th century. So Te Ture Whenua Māori Act 1993, I see that as the most important piece of legislation that happened in the 20th century. And that's also when the Ngāi Tahu Settlement Act happened. So it's no small statement to say that for me, that's the most important piece of law that came through. And I say that because that's the time that our history changed. From Māori land law being about the taking of our land to Māori land law being designed for us to keep our land. And I'm aware that I'm a mokopuna who inherited that, and that many of the people that did the hard work to make Te Ture Whenua Māori Act 1993 real are sitting in this room. And I acknowledge you as the people that created a world for me to inherit. Thank you. I'm also aware that many of the people involved in getting Te Ture Whenua Māori Act 1993 through the House thought that it was outdated by the time that it became law because it took so long for it to become law. So Te Ture Whenua Māori Act was introduced in 1987. It took 7 years for it to become law, and by the time it was law, our world and our people had changed, which led to a number of processes that I want to run through quickly that were about reviewing and changing Te Ture Whenua. And the direction of travel for each of those reviews was the same as reflected on the slide. So our people consistently said that Te Ture Whenua Māori Act is absolutely right when it comes to the retention and the protection of our whenua as a taonga tuku iho, moa ke tonu. They said, yes, that is absolutely right, just like the New Zealand Māori Council said in its papers leading up to Te Ture Whenua. They also said consistently that the balance wasn't quite right when it came to us having mana motuhake over our whenua. That when it came to our ability to make our own decisions about our whenua according to our own priorities, Te Ture Whenua didn't quite have it right. Our people also said that when it came to our opportunities to develop our land, there were practical barriers for us being able to do what we wanted to do, whether that was economic, cultural, social, whatever our aspirations are and will continue to be for our whenua, that there were barriers in Te Ture Whenua's setup that made it hard for our people. And so what happened? 17 years, lots of hui. Started with in 1998, there was a panel to look at the development of multiply owned Māori land. Many of the names that were involved in that process will be familiar to you. That panel focused on looking at changes to help our people make development decisions and changes to our whenua. There was followed by, in 1998, a formal review of Te Ture Whenua. So Te Ture Whenua had a requirement that once it had been in effect for 5 years, it would be formally reviewed. And you can see we're around the motu again at that time. There were lots of conversations, lots of submissions, and the theme that came out of that review process was that there should be greater provision for our mana motuhake. And that led to the next review process the following year. Many of those names will be familiar to you as well. And they looked at similar things. What will it take for us to be able to make more of our decisions in our own image, on our own terms, and get them through the process so that we can realise our aspirations? Looked at reforming the way in which whenua Māori was governed, looked at practical solutions to take some of the barriers away for us being able to develop our land. There was followed by a wānanga of kaumātua drawn from across the motu, and then the formal amendments that came out of the 1998 review of the law. So those amendments were introduced in 1999. You can see from the timeline that they got held up again, and only some of the changes that our people wanted ended up being put into an amended Te Ture Whenua Act. What happens next? Jump forward a few years, and Hoi Taumata established a working group to look at whenua Māori. Many of those names will also be familiar to you. And that rōpū maintained the position that our people had set over the last 10 or so years. We want a legal setup which gives us more autonomy to make our own decisions. We want to remove some of the barriers to developing our land as we want to develop it. And they also brought forward more clearly some of the comments that had come through prior about needing a system to support Māori land. So the information that's available about the record, information that's available about the whenua. 2011, we get the next process, which is about more detailed research, looking at a number of case studies, and an opportunity to test some of the themes that had come through over the last 8 or so years. Oh, no, we're getting more years than that now. And through that process, the research identified that we have more aspirations for our whenua than the law enables us to make real in lots of different ways. So they also recommended a range of practical changes to Māori land law, which then leads to the next process that Dion was implicated in right up to his shoulders. So this was the time when it moves from being about reviewing some of the challenges that our people have identified with whenua Māori and starts to be about testing what we could do. So the 2012-2013 review process was about asking our people whether a set of 5 principles were the right foundations for whenua Māori law going forward. And those principles, it feels a little uncomfortable talking about this while Dion, who wrote it, is sitting in the audience, but I'll have a crack and you can correct me afterwards. That when it comes to law about our whenua, first principle, it must be retained as a taonga tukuiho, by virtue of whakapapa, full stop. But then there were a range of practical principles to reset Māori land law, to give us greater autonomy, to give us greater ability to make the decisions that we want to make about our whenua, to develop our whenua however we want to develop it, whether that's cultural, social, economic, not solely commercially focused. So through that, there were principles about making changes to the governance structures over whenua Māori. There were proposed changes about how we would make decisions to make it easier for the people that want to make changes and do things with our whenua to do that. There were practical recommendations about working with the ever-increasing number of owners for our whenua, the greater fragmentation of our ownership interest. And those principles were taken out round the motu and tested with our people to see whether they were an appropriate starting point to reform whenua Māori law. Those principles went up to Cabinet. Cabinet supported them. And that led to the next stage of the process. So from 2013 through until now, we've pretty much been testing the next level of detail on the basis of each of those principles. So starting with the whāriki that Dion and his mates put down about the principles for reforming Māori land law, we've just worked it up in detail, maintaining the same kaupapa. So in 2013, we had technical panels going around the motu testing that next level of detail. Then in 2014, many of you will have seen Willie again as he brought out the next level of detail about this reform. And there were at least 2 rounds of hui in 2014, which then, this is where the minister normally talks, which is why it is titled On Becoming Minister of Māori Development. I have not been promoted to be the Minister of Māori Development, and I have no aspirations to ever be, just for the record. So when the minister came in, he was very aware that our people had been saying the same thing for 17 years, and that there was an opportunity to do something in this term of Parliament that gave effect to the calls of our people over many years. That meant that the Attorney General, who had been responsible for this reform, handed over the reins to the Minister for Māori Development. The Minister for Māori Development was very clear that when it comes to having a good foundation for whenua Māori, it's not just Te Ture Whenua that is relevant. Resetting Te Ture Whenua Māori is an important part of the solution, is a critically important part of the solution for our people. But there are also other laws that impact on our ability to do things with our whenua. So other laws about rating, other laws about landlocked land, other laws about paper roads, the Public Works Act and on. So that those other pieces of law that impact on our whenua and what we can do also needed to be addressed. The Minister was also very aware that the support system for whenua Māori could be improved. And of course, if we manage to get the law right, being able to do things quite often takes pūtea as well. So he was aware that there was a need for funding to support whenua Māori as well. So with that broader picture about what it takes to give our people the platform for whenua Māori that we want in the 21st century, the Minister established the Ministerial Advisory Group, chaired by Kingi, and with a number of familiar names to keep the continuity with the prior processes to date. And then we came out last year. I'm sure it doesn't feel like that long ago, and we did have the opportunity to do something that is unique. So we were able to bring out the draft bill. As many of you will know, when it comes to legislation and bills, Parliament tends to get a little bit uptight and they don't want people to see the legislation in its draft form until it's introduced into the House. So normally we only get to look at bills once they're in the select committee stage. The Minister was very clear that this piece of legislation is about our people, and so it needed to come out to our people before it goes anywhere near Parliament. So bringing the exposure draft out on the road last year was about making sure that our people had good information to evaluate whether these reforms are right and good. We were really aware that when we came out on the road last year, neither the process nor the bill was perfect. The timeframes were a real pressure for our people, and the bill that came out on the road at that time was a long way from where it is now. It was rough, but we knew that we needed to get it out to our people to start the conversation on it. From those hui, we had a number of whakaaro shared during the hui. We had close to 400 submissions come in about changes that our people thought needed to be made to the draft bill. And I can assure you that the Ministerial Advisory Group has spent a long time in small rooms pouring through the recommendations that our people made about what was good, what was bad, and what absolutely needed to change about the content of this reform. So the main purpose of this hui is for us to report back and to talk to you about the changes that have been made to this bill in response to the whakaaro that our people shared. And for me personally, I live at home, so it's really important to me that we're clear and straight about the changes that have to be made, because my tauas will give me that look which says, if you don't do that, girl, you should just leave. So that's why we're here. So I want to move on to talking through the changes that have been made. One of the comments that the Minister has been making when he's been on the road is that this is a window of opportunity. We're aware that this reform is a step. One of our PA leaders down home, his aspiration is that at the PA we have full lawmaking rights, so that when it comes to what we do on our whenua, we wouldn't have to apply for building consents. We'd be able to raise our own rates from our own people. We'd be able to raise our own rates from other people living in our rohi. That's his vision of what mana motuhake looks like. This bill doesn't go that far. And arguably, this bill can't go that far in my lifetime. I will take it on as part of my life's work to move us in that direction, but this bill does move us forward. And the question for this hui is whether it moves us forward enough for now. And the answer to that question is kai au koutou. So the big reveal, what are the changes that have been made to this draft bill following all of these submissions? The big changes that I want to go through, these are not the only changes, but they're really significant changes. So the first one is the purpose statement. And this is something that might seem like it's just a lawyer's point, but it's really not. So one of the great historical things about Te Ture Whenua Māori Act 1993 was it was the first time in statute that the treaty had been recognised in the way that it was. It was the first time in a piece of law that our relationship with our whenua had been recognised as a taonga tuku iho. It was the first time in statute that our tikanga had been recognised like that. So that hugely symbolically important, hugely politically important. And when we came out with the bill last year, people said your purpose statement has lost all of the heart. It's lost all of the power of the 1993 Act statement about the treaty, our relationship with our whenua and the place of our tikanga. So we went away and redrafted that purpose statement so that it keeps that heart and spirit and upgrades the bidding as well. So from a legal point of view, where those statements are in Te Ture Whenua 1993, they're in a preamble, which means legally that they're quite soft. Whereas in this version, we've got the same content, but it's gone into a part of the bill that is legally stronger. So we've taken the 1993 approach and made it stronger. So that's a key change. The second change that we've made is the managing kai whakarite provision. So the kai whakarite provision was universally disliked because it was about external people being able to manage our whenua. And everywhere we went, people said, that's wrong, that's last century, get rid of it, so we did. The managing kai whakarite provision has now been removed. There were also concerns expressed on the road about changes to changing the status of whenua Māori. People were concerned that the new bill had made it too easy to change the status of whenua Māori and therefore go down a road of alienation. So those provisions have been tightened to make sure that our whenua is retained as a taonga tuku iho. One that I understand was particularly popular last time we were here were people saying that the transition costs on existing trusts and incorporations were not okay. So the last time we were out, the bill provided for all trusts and incorporations to transition into becoming rangotōpu, the new governance model under this bill. And people were really clear in telling us that there are a bunch of trusts and incorporations that are doing a great job, that under the existing framework are perfectly fine and are doing amazing things, and that requiring them to become rangotōpu was just a hoha. It would be expensive, it would take lots of time, and it was unnecessary. So that has been changed. There is now no requirement for existing trusts and incorporations to transition into a rangotōpu. So if you are kapai with how you're going now, then you can stay that way. So we're trying to remove that hoha on our people. The other change, which is in a similar place of choice, was about whānau trusts. So following on from Dion's work, there was a provision in the bill that when someone passed without a will, there'd be an automatic whānau trust created. And the logic behind that was that it would stop the further fragmentation of ownership. And people said, that's nice, but I quite like my free will. Don't make that compulsory. So there's now an opt-out provision when it comes to the whānau trusts. Tamariki and mokopuna don't automatically have to have their interests wrapped up into a whānau trust. So in all of these changes that have been made to the bill, the direction of travel has been about lessening the burden on our people from changing the law, ensuring that our people have choice, and most importantly, maintaining the direction that our people have asked for over the last 17 years. So this reform is still about our mana motuhake being able to be expressed and exercised the way that we want it to be. And it's about our people being able to make choices about their whenua on their own terms. But wait, that's not all. Because last time we were out on the road, our people were very clear that rating was one of the number one obstacles to the development of our whenua. That the existence of rates arrears was a real problem. That the process of having to apply for rates remissions was hard and time-consuming and quite often caught up in politics. So there have been two key changes to the rating that are proposed. The first is more opportunities for no rates, and the second is lower rates for whenua Māori that is rateable. So that first point about no rates, so there are three key changes that this reform proposes in respect of no rates. The first is for our marae and urupa. At the moment, they can be non-rateable if they're 2 hectares or under. This reform expands that so that we're not confined in just that arbitrary number of 2 hectares. Our marae and urupa, those places where we are most fundamentally as, will now be non-rateable. The second change is our whenua that's under ngā whenua rāhui will also become non-rateable. And that's a really important equity point. So land that's gone into a QE2 covenant is non-rateable. So there was no reason for our land that was under ngā whenua rāhui to be rateable, so that will now be non-rateable. The most significant change for large blocks of whenua Māori though is the change to unused and unoccupied whenua Māori. So those blocks of land which are unused and unoccupied, councils will now have the ability to create policies that they become non-rateable. So that would mean instead of having to go through that process of applying for rates remissions and getting caught up on councillors reviewing every application, as I understand happens many places around the motu, councils will be able to create policies which make unused and unoccupied whenua Māori non-rateable. For whenua Māori that is being used, that will be rateable, but there's been a change so that the rates that are paid become lower. And why is that? That's because at the moment, as you know, rates are set according to the highest and best use of the land, according to the non-Māori land that pretty much might be next door, and take off a small discount for the land being multiply owned, and which people have pretty much said isn't quite right, because the whole basis behind valuations is about what's a fair market value. We don't have a fair market value because we don't sell our whenua. So ideally, we'd want to get to a rating policy that is based on whakaaro Māori. For now, where we've managed to get to is that the rating valuation will be somewhere around about twice as much a discount as exists now. So at the moment, under the Manga 2 model for setting rating valuation, takes into account the two factors are about multiple ownership and the potential presence of sites of significance. Under this model, there'll be more factors taken into account about time and costs associated with status change, about the heritage significance of whenua Māori, and number of owners. So the rating valuation will vary according to different blocks and the different situations surrounding each block, but it will be a much reduced rating valuation. So at this point, I've talked about the changes to the bill. So they're real and they're reflected in the revised draft of the bill. I've talked about rating valuations, the no rates and the lower rates. They are real and have been approved by Cabinet. The next areas of work are areas of work. So we don't know the outcome of these pieces of work, but Cabinet has committed to work on them over the next few months. And these are some of the other areas that our people have said are really significant when it comes to our whenua. So the first is landlocked whenua Māori. We know that there is a lot of whenua Māori that is surrounded by other people's land, so it's quite tricky to do what you want to do with your whenua when you can't get to it. So there is a work program going on to solve those problems of not being able to get to our whenua because it's landlocked. One of the early priorities on that is finding solutions when it comes to it being Crown land that surrounds our land, because that's a lot easier to make progress on. The second part of the work program is about paper roads. So you know those things that once upon a time someone thought they might put a road somewhere, so they put it on a map. The road never got built, but it still means that when it comes to what we want to do with our whenua, we get an answer of no because there's a paper road on your title. So there's a work program to solve those paper roads being on our titles. And the final and big work program that's ongoing is about the Public Works Act. And we've heard very clearly across the motu that the Public Works Act should not, as a point of principle, be able to take whenua Māori. We've got a long history that says that that is not okay, and that there should be changes to offer back and other things about the Public Works Act. There is a very clear commitment to working on these take, but it is a process of working. We are optimistic about where the outcomes will get to. Then the next part of this reform. So we've talked about changes to the law. There's also changes to the support system for whenua Māori, and that's the Māori Land Service. So the last time we were out on the road, the Māori Land Service lacked detail about what it was, who was going to do it, where it was going to go, and so this is an opportunity to update on the Māori Land Service, but there's still more work to go on it. So there are two important things that sit at the heart of the Māori Land Service. The first is all of the good things that we have now with the Māori Land Court, we keep and we add on top. So the Māori Land Service is designed to be an and for our people. The second principle is that the Māori Land Service should make it easier, faster, cheaper, more accessible for our people to work with their whenua. So what should the Māori Land Service be doing? It should be a one-stop shop where everything about whenua Māori can be accessed in one place and it can be more useful to our people. The design is that we keep all of the good things from the court about our title and the legal things surrounding our whenua, and we add on to that more support for developing our whenua according to our own aspirations. The Māori Land Service will also need to do new things if this reform goes ahead. So if this reform makes the changes that it's designed to do about increasing our autonomy over our whenua, then we need a new support system. So a practical example of if we want to change the trustees on a block now, we go to the court, we ask for a hearing, we turn up for the hearing, we wait for the hearing. If you're my taua, that takes a long time and she gets grumpy about having to go out to pay for more parking and then come back in and wait a little bit longer. So that's kind of the legal pathway that we've got now. With the Māori Land Service, lots of those things that we now do as a legal process become an administrative process. So for that trustee change, we'd make the decisions and we'd send a piece of paper to the Māori Land Service saying we've done this and we followed this good process, and then it would get registered. So the Māori Land Service will be there because it's about new processes for doing things, need new systems to support them. There's also the big one that we talked about last time we were on the road, about the dispute resolution service. So the Māori Land Service will be the ones that run and operate that new dispute resolution process, which is more about working kanohikitia rather than through the court process. So the Māori Land Service will do more things. It will have advisors to help us work through the legal things about our whenua. It will have support for the use and development of our whenua and the dispute resolution services. That's all nice. So how would we find this Māori Land Service? And this is getting into the territory where there's still more work to be done on the Māori Land Service. And the plan is to be out around the motu later this year, working with our people about the details of the Māori Land Service. So key points, the aspiration is that the Māori Land Service is more places than the Māori Land Court is now. But there's been no decision made on who runs the Māori Land Service, and there are a range of whakaaro floating around the motu about who might be appropriate. Perhaps it's Te Puni Kōkiri, perhaps it's parts of it are contracted out, perhaps there's iwi involvement. All of the options are still on the table about who runs the Māori Land Service. People have been really clear that the people of the Māori Land Court are important. That the people of the Māori Land Court know our whānau, they know our whakapapa, they know our whenua, and that capability and heart is critical to the success of the Māori Land Service. I know that down home, one of the Māori Land Court people was so important to our kaimātua that they gave him a block of land in Stolen for the iwi, that's Uncle Terry. So we understand that looking after the people in the Māori Land Court and ensuring that they're valued and still available to our people is important. So, and the Māori Land Service will also engage with that tricky question about how much of our record goes online. So those types of questions about who runs it, where it is, the nature of the services, what we do about internet technology, they're all part of the workshops that will happen around the motu in the coming months. Next part, the Whenua Māori Fund. So the last time that we were on the road, there was an announcement that just over $12 million had been approved to support Māori land development. Our people were pretty clear that that's nice, but that's not enough. The fund is still currently at that just over $12 million mark. That fund will be launched at the end of this month, and applications will be open from then. The fund is designed to help people explore and test and make progress on what they want to do with their whenua. The intention is that it's not just the big guys that benefit from this fund, that it's available at flex routes to support people to explore development opportunities on their land. So one that we heard just the other day was about a whānau that want to explore a mixed orchard with a papakainga in front of it. Happens to be at Mahia, so I quite like to go there because they're putting the papakainga in the front so that our people get the best view. So development opportunities like that, whether it's about testing what the land can do and that type of thing. So where to from here? You'll be happy to know that very shortly I stop talking and quite properly the floor turns to you so that you can ask questions and make statements that need to be made. I think the most important part of where to from here is the Tribunal Report. So many of you will have seen, many of you will have read the first chapter of the Waitangi Tribunal Report on this take. The Minister has committed that this bill will not be introduced until after the Tribunal has completed its final report. And kind of a personal statement from me about the Waitangi Tribunal chapter that's out. I am really excited about that and I wholeheartedly support what the Tribunal has said. So the Tribunal has said when it comes to taonga Māori, whether it's our whenua, things that are significant to us, the standard is that Māori have to show majority support for that change. So what the law has been up until now is that there has to be good faith consultation. there has to be good talking. What the tribunal has said when it comes to whenua Māori and other taonga Māori is that Māori people must support the change. And so that is absolutely the right kind of decision. And one of the reasons that we're out on the road now is to test whether there is support for these reforms. So when the tribunal considered the evidence that went to it, all of these changes hadn't been made. So what the tribunal said is, we don't know if there's enough support amongst iwi Māori, and the Crown must be very careful about ensuring there is sufficient support for this reform amongst our people. And like I said before, these reforms don't get to the version of mana motuhake where we get to be completely sovereign. They do take us a step in a direction to greater mana motuhake. And the question about whether those steps are good enough for now, kai ao koutou. So subject to working out whether there is sufficient Māori support for these reforms, the next stages of this process is that if the bill is introduced in March, then it will go through a select committee process that many of you will be familiar with. The Māori Affairs Select Committee will turn up at a place near you, they'll receive your submissions, and there'll be a further opportunity to test the details of this bill. In parallel, we'll have the work program going on about landlocked land, paper roads and the Public Works Act, as well as workshops on designing the Māori Land Service. If this rolls to plan, the new law would be through the House process in about November, and then there would be the real work done on setting up the Māori Land Service. The political realities, if this bill isn't introduced this year, then it probably won't ever be. And they're not trying to sensationalise things, but we know politicians, and we know how they think about elections, and the national government is not going to introduce this bill next year because it's too close to election time. The second year of every parliamentary term, that's when you get the opportunity to do the tricky stuff. And as we well know, anything to do with iwi Māori is always in the tricky camp. So if we don't get the bill in this year, it's unlikely to be something that we can get through while National is in government. And we don't know what Labour's intentions are. So that's where we are. If you want more information, there's more information including the updated slides available on the Te Puni Kōkiri website. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being patient while we went through the presentation. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Nā reira, tēnā rā tātou.